look at the team, look at the opportunities to learn, because everything is about learning. And growth manager specifically, you need a product that is marketable. If you have a bad product, there is nothing we can do. I'm an analyst and I couldn't fix a broken game. So this is why we need a good product, good team, opportunity to learn, and opportunity to also fail in that sense.
Welcome to Mobile Growth and Pancakes, a podcast by StoreMaven. We break down how and why mobile apps grow. In each episode, we invite a mobile growth expert onto the show to break down a specific mobile growth strategy, how it worked, why it worked, and what they would do differently. I'm your host, Esther Shatz.
Hey everybody, and thank you for joining another episode of Mobile Growth and Pancakes. I'm your host, Jonathan Fishman. I'm VP Marketing here at StoreMaven. And today I'm really excited to have here with me Ivan from SuperScale. He's the CEO and co-founder. How are you?
Very good. How about you?
Pretty good today. Where are you based? Where are you calling from?
Well, that's a story behind that. But currently, we're based in Central Europe, in Bratislava. But the company was actually founded in Nordics. So first 3 years in Sweden, then Finland, and actually 2 years in London. And then even my daughter was born there. I thought that I'll be Londoner for the time being. But as I went to visit my parents to show the granddaughter for the first time last March, we landed in Bratislava, and 48 hours later, lockdown, global pandemic.
Oh man, yeah.
Or airports closed. London, literally the worst place to be at the time. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'm back in Slovakia again. So got kind of stuck. But we have a big team there, so over 60 people at this point. So it was also nice to be with our main office. So it has its pros as well.
Yeah, man, I'm sick and tired from these. There's a new variant now. Everybody's talking about. I hope it will end sometime, but we'll see. So you want to tell us a bit about SuperScale and what you guys do?
Absolutely. Like our mission at SuperScale, we scale the games to their maximum business potential. So our specialty or kind of our insight that we find out after my whole career as a business analyst, especially working with games, is that the industry is so fast growing and complex that there's no such thing as a perfectly optimized game. Any game from where top 1,000, top 100, top 10 grossing can be more successful and better optimized for growth. And this is where we step in. We holistically look at the whole game and its business model and find out what are the quickest ways how to get the more business performance out of title, whether on the top end, middle, or the bottom end of the funnel. So this is something we can discuss.
Cool. And which type of games do you guys work with usually? Is it like mid-core, hardcore, hyper-casual?
Yeah, so actually it's like nowadays is anything from really hyper-casual to casual mid-core to hardcore. The platforms, there is also a bit of an evolution. When I started working with games 8 and something years ago, actually we started with Facebook and web-based games, then transitioned into like let's say 50-50 mobile and PC console, also like a bigger titles there. And then it became 95% mobile because of the pure growth. But actually this year with the kind of craziness around the NFTs and also the changes within the mobile gaming ecosystem, we see web-based games are getting a bigger portion also in our portfolio and way how to grow. So yeah, we were actually throughout the history, I would say most of our work was on mobile, something around, but see right now web as a fast-growing platform thanks to NFT and crypto games.
Awesome. So today we want to talk about two things. The first is a methodology to maximize a game's business potential and its growth. And the second topic is optimizing in-app purchases and monetization in general, again, to increase growth. So let's start with the first topic. So can you describe, like in general terms, like your methodology or how you approach getting and starting to work with a new game and trying to identify how to grow the game in the best way possible?
Yeah, absolutely. So something maybe I would start with describing like what's the usual way how we see game companies approach and publishers approach this kind of a topic. What we usually see is a still kind of a pretty big disconnect between, let's say, user acquisition and growth teams and their way how they look at the game's potential and growth opportunities and the product teams. So you can see it something that we talk about also how they manage their data, how they approach their priorities and so on. And this is where we also see a lot of ways how it could be done better. So one thing to if you look at games as a business model and look at from the point of players' life cycle. So first of all, obviously top end of the funnel, you need to get the player in some way, probably through some paid user acquisition campaign. So you show them some ads, some of them will click, some of them will go to the store page and install the game, and some of them will even find the icon later and start it, right? And start actually playing. But we already have multiple steps to look at and optimize even before the player actually started the game. And obviously, so this is what I would call the top end of the funnel optimization. And this is the usual focus on UA, ASO related topics. Then you transition to the kind of a middle of the funnel, which actually starts, or I would describe it starts with your first session, and then progress from the early up to the game, probably towards the first conversion to a purchase to actually after onboarding finishes, you're able to interact with the game mechanics, you are able to progress somewhere, and obviously as you consume more and more content, some of the players will end up as end game players, and this is the kind of the bottom end of the funnel, how to optimize the players who consumed all the content and are just waiting for you to give them something more, or and so on. So this is the way how we think about the game, and this is also some parts of the funnel how we think you should think about it. And what we usually see is that there is not something that we see a bit lacking is usually there's not a one person or department that looks at the whole parts. You have your growth department that looks at first couple steps of the funnel. You have the product team, which again sometimes that they focus maybe too much on the end game players and churning out producing more and more content. And maybe the new players suffer because the game gets more complicated and the onboarding is more funneled. And also, especially if you're running the games for multiple years, what about those players in between, right? And how to create the contents somewhere in the mid game. So this is something that you should be always mindful. How does this whole game business fit together?
Yeah, I think something really interesting in terms of challenges, especially looking at the top of the funnel, and also for these these new players, and basically personalizing the experience for them, is the lack of user-level data that you get today, especially in the iOS ecosystem with the ATT framework and the deprecation of the IDFA. So how do you approach these challenges? Let's start from acquiring new players and quality players. Like in the past, game UA teams were extremely reliant on lookalike audiences and using user-level data and reporting it back to the ad networks to signal to these networks, hey, I want more of these kind of players after they, made an in-app purchase or did something valuable or a proxy of value within the game. So how would you approach this challenge today where you're responsible of finding these quality players yourself?
That's obviously, I wouldn't say like $1 billion question, but even like whatever, $50 billion question.
A trillion.
You look at some big things on that. So obviously it's worth to looking into, and this is what I also love about kind of this industry, that it absolutely evolves. You cannot really rely on something that worked whatever even 6 months ago, a year ago, to be working for 5 years and change, right? So the way we see this way how to look at this problem in a couple of ways. So first on them is also like, fortunately, we're still not in, let's say, offline advertising and kind of evaluating. The good example is buying billboards, right? Like obviously, I think generally because how the data and user level data was easy to get and let's say easy to evaluate, I think it showed in the way how the UA growth team and methodology were structured and extremely heavy reliant on this fact. So other ways how to acquire players were kind of, let's say, not prioritized. So there weren't that many marketers that relied on something else than just a couple of networks that they could run these campaigns and exactly compute the ROAS, and didn't really investigate some other channels, including whatever TV, offline, didn't really investigate other platforms. So the mobile was so dominant that you've seen that the web was kind of in behind. By the way, how right now you have this kind of a data scarcity, and apparently it will be just worse. You need to kind of challenge it or cope with it in a couple of ways. So first of all, fortunately, you still get some amount of user level data based on the players who give consent to you and to the network you use. So this is nice. Obviously, it's not, unfortunately, it's not like 90 or 80%. It's it ranges from whatever 10 to 25, I guess, depending on the game and the audience. But still, you have some, let's say, baseline to work with. Then you need to look at, what's the game we are talking about? Is it like a game which relies extremely heavy on top spenders? Is it kind of a, let's say, social casino or hardcore game which absolutely was reliant on very efficient lookalike audiences and an ability of, I don't know, Facebook, Google UAC, and this kind of networks to find this 0.1% of payers that will pay for the rest of it. And then we see that these kind of games took the biggest hit so far, because obviously it just got so much less effective. But on the other side, if your game is getting more to the mid-core, casual mid-core, hyper casual, and something in between, you're still and you do not rely that heavily on these top spenders here. You have a healthy ad monetization. You have healthy distribution of your payers. You still can work quite well with this model, which obviously you need to enhance and kind of extrapolate and get some assumptions. So your modeling is obviously got a bit worse and less reliant, but still you can work with it and scale game. Maybe you took some hit in the efficiency, but it's not like that dramatic as you could see in some other segments. So yeah, definitely you need to think about how your game and how much you are reliant, especially on its top spenders, to approach your user acquisition strategy and evaluation.
Yeah, I think that if I can imagine like a matrix, and like one scale is basically where you are in terms of hyper casual and hardcore. And also another scale is how do you monetize? Like, is it based on in-app purchases or even, some type of game subscription or something really, really specific? Or you monetize through ads and you're a hyper casual game, and most of the monetization happens in the first 48 hours or so after the user has opened the game. So the more you're in that realm of hyper casual monetized by ads, the better you are, because you're still aiming for a really, really broad audience. Basically everybody almost these days is a potential player, as opposed to the other side of that matrix, which is what do these guys do these days? How do they still find these big spenders? What kind of work would you recommend these folks do?
So one way how to look at it. I would say there are two problems with this with this. So one is actual evaluation. So properly figuring out what is the true ROI on your budget spend, because obviously you cannot really pair it that efficiently anymore. But the second problem is the performance of the channels themselves, which the evaluation itself, obviously, it's a bit of a problem if you need to build a business case from your CFO or from your investor to to pour more money into the channels. You should have really compelling model that this actually works. But again, when we're talking, there are ways how to do it, how to have some kind of a blended or kind of a method which borrows the way how you would evaluate offline campaigns or TV, billboard, this kind of stuff when you're looking at how much bigger is my revenue in this particular region and channel and platform compared to the point where I wasn't running the campaign, right? So you can even without attribution, you can assume some effect there. And if you enhance it with this whatever 10-20% players that you can attribute and they are not uniform, you can get some idea how it works. But I think the bigger problem is actually the lack of effective optimization and lookalike audiences, and this is which is the tougher problems to solve, because we're so dependent on the algorithm of Facebook UIC that they're able to cope with this data loss to build the profiles to go after. So what we've usually see that you need to probably go a bit wider with your approach and do this campaign mix where you would add multiple channel, multiple points, online, offline, do some kind of a test that is localized and try to evaluate it based on the uplift. But again, this is something that usually bigger games with some IPs, with bigger budget even for testing, are able to do, because again, you need to invest quite a bit to see to get something significant. So actually, the small to mid-sized games that relied heavily on lookalikes and stuff are really hit, and it's not an easy way out for these guys. The way how to go about it is really out of the box and try to go the way how some of the bigger publishers go. Try to go back to web where you can do some stuff, or you can at least evaluate it, or try to think about again some other parts of the funnel. So is it possible that I could get the signals or monetization signals earlier and help the algorithms to optimize better? Am I able to tune the first 24, 48 hours so that I have higher chance to convert the players? Some of the games, yes. Some of them, which it takes you easily a week to finish the onboarding, are in a tough spot scanning wise. So yeah, I don't think that every game is, unfortunately, the games were hit in different times, and some games have much harder times to solve all these issues at their scale.
Yeah, from things that I'm hearing, there's a lot of teams that are taking an approach, which is, I call it the sub-publisher optimization approach. It's basically looking at the value, and a bit we'll talk about data and where this data is coming from, but looking a bit about the value that users that come in from different sub-publishers, different source apps to your product page through ad networks, usually. How the value of users from each app is different, and then try to identify the contextual buckets of source apps that have a really good affinity with your game. So, for example, you might discover that these big spenders are usually coming in after they played games from a different category or a subcategory, and if they played that game, there's a very high chance that they would be top spenders in your game. And it's basically like changing the responsibility. Like, as you said, everything is changing in our industry so fast. And in the past few years, it was the role of the ad network, especially the self-attributing networks like Facebook, to find you where these big spenders are. Now the responsibility has shifted, and it's now on these UA teams, these marketing and growth teams, to find where are these users? Like, who are they? That's a question that it's kind of crazy to think about, but nobody thought about it in the past few years. Who are these lookalike audiences? Like, if you would put them in a room, would you be able to categorize them to understand who they really are? And now they have to ask these questions and find them where they spend their time. And one of the ways to do it is to find other games from these contextual buckets, like maybe there's a high affinity between hidden object to match 3, specific IPs. If somebody's playing a game with a specific IP from, I don't know, the Marvel universe, and you have a game that has some mentioning of the Marvel universe, maybe there's a high affinity there. And then to try to target your UA campaigns like that. So that's another approach that I'm hearing about. I want to talk a bit about data because you also mentioned to me before we started the methodology of management of basically the business data, and it's a really big issue these days with data being scattered, the data from MMPs being less reliable with the deprecation of the IDFA, data even coming from SK Ad Network from Apple, their own attribution solution. So what's your methodology to basically create a place or a BI system for teams to understand how their top level KPIs change and how they might influence them by changing the marketing input, as you said, like increasing budgets, changing creatives, doing any changes? Yeah,
so this is kind of my favorite topic because ultimately it goes to the kind of the crux of the problem, because obviously you can ultimately your goal should be, yes, I'm going to improve the game, or I'm going to do some business decision, I'm going to increase budget or some campaign or decrease VC and perform. But the thing is that to make this decision, so many things can go wrong, starting with the quality of the data you're dealing with, continuing with some problems that you may have with acquiring the data, interpreting the data, and making the correct decision on top of that. So there's actually a long way to that can go wrong. And being a business analyst trait, it makes you super paranoid, especially in any kind of insight that you get. It's when it's usually extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. So sometimes, and especially in this industry, when a teams of tens of people are able to make and manage game which is played by tens and hundreds of millions of players around the world, your intuition doesn't necessarily work or scale that much. So sometimes you just cannot believe what you're seeing, and sometimes the errors in the data. Sometimes actually those you do not truly understand why some players love data. I love this example from hill climb racing that we did. Our partners at Fingersoft, that for a long time there was this notion that interstitial ads or more interstitial ads will kill retention and decrease the user performance, user experience, and so on and so on. So I was very cautious about implementing them. But still, at some levels, we've run some tests how to increase the frequency of ads, especially after this change that made it kind of more. After you finish the race, you get this like an ad break, and you continue further. And actually, it turned out to be a super weird results, because we were seeing some crazy stuff. Like when we increased the frequency of ads, we've seen improved retention in long term. And Hill Climb Racing is a franchise which is downloaded by 1.6 or 8 billion times at this point. So you have a ton of players to test some changes. And it was statistically significant, everything, but nobody believed it. Even me, like, no, it's not possible. That there's be some problem with the with the test. So let's rerun it again. And I think we ran it for like a year and 4 iterations to find out if it's like that. And ultimately found out, for whatever reason, we are able to increase the interstitials without getting hits on reviews or the retention. And
how do you explain that? Like what happened there? Just interesting.
So ultimately, okay. If I would be very honest, ultimately you can never know. But our hypothesis at the end was that actually, players, after they finished a race or lap of the race, they actually liked having a bit of a time off before the next round to get a bit of a wind down after let's say this intense session or intense portion of time. So could be connected with that, could be something different. Hard to say, but again, it's it's how you handle the data and how you interpret it and how paranoid you are. I think this is how successful your growth strategy is. So coming back to your own question, first of all, what we've seen is a big problem is the disconnection within where you actually store data and where you have it. If you look at the growth teams, they many times they optimize, or generally how UA works, usually by devices, not necessarily by players, by devices, which again has some advantages how to deal with that, because if you're handling a big portfolio, I don't know, I'm managing UA for 20 games, across whatever 50 platforms, mobile, web, and so on. It gives you some framework how to work in different kind of games and how to do some real decisions. On the flip side, obviously you have players who can play your game on multiple devices. Obviously, you may misattribute some players that, hey, actually this is not a new player, this is an existing player that logs through a different device, so how to duplicate that and so on. So it leads to some inefficiencies. But obviously, if you want to have more framework that counts that into, you need to have an integration with a product which understands that these players are actually from the same account. You need to you have another layer of complexity to deal with it. So many teams choose not to do it, and obviously then, let's say, suffer some consequences because of it. And also on the product side, if you look at how the data is gathered, every team, every game, even with the same studio, may choose a different data model, different data points they track, the different tools, and do not really take into account how the changes or this data impact the performance of UA. And this is where we're getting into this big conversation that actually was muted before IDFA, and now it's more pronounced. I'd say that the changes that you are doing on a product side, generally you can look at that. Hey, I'm monetizing better my existing players, so I'm doing some content and some for those players who are with me, years, and consume all the content and do this stuff, but do not necessarily have a big impact on no impact on the user acquisition and the new players which are coming in, and you cannot attribute them and so on. So how to balance this approach and how to make sure that you're not over focusing on the end-game players and do not really deliver the uplift for the new ones, thus the scalability on the UA suffers, and how to cope with it, because again more unorthodox answers to the IDFA problem is that, hey, actually you need to step up your game to monetize the new players that you are buying, so your margin of error, so the LTV increase in the whatever day 7, day 28, or what's your ROAS curve that you optimize for, is actually that big enough that it kind of offsets the losses in the precision and the losses in the performance that you're seeing in the channel. So I think this is again puts a big emphasis for both UA teams and product teams to have a more unified approach to analyze the game as a whole, and not having this, let's say, kind of a disconnected data. Let's say data sources, data management, and ultimately doing optimizing for different things on different ends of the funnel, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a great point. Even if I take a step back, it doesn't matter if you're in UA, marketing, or growth, you need to have one source of truth, like a place where, first of all, in my view, it's also very important that business users will be able to interact with this data. It's not enough to have like a one source of truth system, like a BI system, where you have to rely on data engineers and analysts that write SQL and Python, and they're the gatekeepers of the data, and you have to wait for this kind of analysis, and you can't really explore data in yourself. You have to have a system that even business users that don't know SQL, they don't know how to code, they can interact with the data and answer simple business questions. And I completely agree with you on having the data from the product itself. I think it has to be connected with user acquisition data. Even now, after this data doesn't really make sense to rely only on the data from the MMP because of the deprecation of the IDFA. And I think that the Android ecosystem is going to go a very similar route. Which brings in the data sources side of the equation, which is looking at App Store Connect data, something that a lot of teams have neglected in the past, because when you wanted to see installs, you looked at the MMP, and you saw there. Of course, there was a lot of misattribution to organic, and there's a lot of challenges with the attribution logic and the window and everything. But App Store Connect has actually developed a lot in the past, I would say, year or so in terms of the data they provide you. These days, you can get first-time downloads, re-downloads by source, by the referring app, the source app that drove the install to your app. And now they're really releasing data, cohorted data. You can actually filter out sales data if you monetize through in-app purchases by install date. So you can do really, really cool things with that data if you bring it into your system, such as it's an example more from the ASO side, but if you got featured, for example, on a certain date or for 2 days, you can actually measure the uplift in sales from that cohort of users with App Store Connect data, something you could never do before, because you didn't have this granularity of data in App Store Connect, and not a lot of teams took that data into their internal BI systems. So on the data source side, I think that the more we move away from user level data and IDFA and device data on the UI side, the more you need to bring in aggregated data from the only source that makes sense, which is App Store Connect. So I think that's also something really important for folks to take from this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm 100% with you. I'm looking forward actually how, as you say, we expect the Google Play and the Android ecosystem to again, unfortunately, do something very similar. So we also need to see what kind of data you'll be able to query and to integrate and to take into account building the models on the Android side. And something that, again, I cannot stress enough with what we've seen even pre-IDFA or whatever, like with the single source of truth is very interesting concept as working on more than 150 games at this point. And ultimately, we as a kind of a business optimization company, we need to start with getting all the business data into one place and making absolutely sure that we trust the data and do some changes. What we were doing, we try to cross-check all the sources of data. So even, let's say, some redundancy in the data collection is again topic which it's like we were preaching for some time, but now it's even more pronounced. So let's say the revenue which you track from Firebase and in a purchase data and the stores in aggregated form give you, and on top of that, your MMP partners and the UA channels claim, do they match, and do they match with what kind of a precision? We've seen some crazy stuff like Google Play Store, which kind of sends you the data or sends you the money ultimately, and you should kind of believe it. Also, it has some outages. Sometimes there are errors in the data, and sometimes you don't know what's happening. So if you count that into this complexity, that yes, getting more aggregated data from sources like Connect is great. But fun fact, even Apple or Google makes mistakes, and
for sure
they are sending you and will send you some data. And if you have no way how to cross-check this, you can do whatever you do with your power to do the good decision, but ultimately it may prove that it's not working, and not because you made a mistake, but somebody from the data set you are unable to verify independently or cross-check with something else. It's giving you false negatives or positives where the players are coming from. They are valuable to you. So I think this is also something worth noting, that what we're seeing, that these new ways how to acquire players that rely on some very proprietary data sets will be again have some limitations. So it's a good question how much in the end you'll be reliant on the platforms themselves that the only them will have the full picture. They will own the UA channel, the platform, the attribution, and very scarcely share it around. And how much locked in you will be, 3 years from now or 5 years from now. Like I could totally see that right now it's nothing that well, it could be a couple of years down the road, right?
For sure, yeah. I think that's the way, at least Apple, that's the way they're moving here with SK Ad Network as their attribution solution. I'm sure it will evolve and have a lot more data and will be way more reliable as a solution. I think even with custom product pages that are launching these days, it's supposed to launch every day now. They basically enable UA teams to do some attribution in an aggregated and user private way, because you can see sales on a custom product page level, and a custom product page, if you configure it correctly, can basically match campaign or a network or a specific source that you choose to, because it's basically a unique URL that you choose where you place it. And then you can basically calculate return on ad spend once again in a reliable way. So I think they're going there on the UA side. I can also see search ads evolving, and I don't know exactly how. There's a lot of theories on how Apple will do it, but I can see search ads evolving to be the biggest ad network there is. If you think about it, they don't need to do a lot. They just need to enable. They don't even need an SDK. They just need to release something like Apple Ads and like an in-app advertising product for app developers, and then they can, be like a one-stop shop for developers on the iOS ecosystem. Come develop on our ecosystem. It's the largest and more lucrative ecosystem in the world. You're going to get a really easy and privacy-first way to monetize your app with in-app ads if you want. You have in-app purchases, of course, and we'll give you all the marketing tools that you need. You won't need an attribution provider because we have SK Ad Network, and you'll have a lot of data to perform analyses through App Store Connect. And they're probably going to enable you to take that data in a more easy way to whatever system you use to analyze their performance. So I can see how they will grow to that direction. I want us to talk a bit about in-app purchases because we want to cover that as well. So do you want to start talking about why and when should a game team basically approach in-app purchase monetization and what it is in your view?
So I think we touched a bit in the context of the whole maximizing game potential on the first topic, how you can look at in-app purchases as and how to optimize them in a different way to achieve different goals. So one thing that again we see that more game studios and publishers are looking at is again focusing a bit more how to get the losses or the perceived slower growth in the post-IDFA world through something that they have in control, or the product of the game, which again is something that just you are able to directly to change and get some uplift, again, if you focus more on this part, but it has also some caveats how to go about it. So first of all, we did talk before we talk about, in-app purchases, what kind of a game you have. You have a pure ad-driven hyper-casual game. So how to implement in-app purchase economy, essentially, that makes sense. This is even possible in your title to have some kind of meta game in mind, or you need to develop a new title with this in hand. I would argue that ultimately a game which is resilient to change, and whatever Apple, Google, or platforms will throw at us, or major UA channels will throw at us, you will be kind of nimble and you could work around the changes that you have in attribution, changes that you have in ad monetization, because again we've seen some expected changes that how what kind of ads will be able to show on certain platforms at certain times, and what kind of frequency will it be? Will it be that, let's say, free, or let's say up to the developer like now, or not? I think the conversation is also that this will be something that will change in some future. So how do your hyper-casual data, which relies just on this, will be able to scale if you get suddenly, for whatever reason, limited revenue for that? So again, in-app purchases, I think it's a hedge against, or healthy in-app purchase economy, correctly implemented, is a hedge against the different problems or different changes. So again, in the ecosystem, if you already have in-app purchases or in-app purchase based economy in your game. So in my mind, it's something that it amounts to anywhere between 30 to 100% of your revenue, which probably also should think about a bit diversifying on the other side. There is a lot of that can be done, but the problem with, in my opinion, with in-app purchase optimization, that the changes to that requires it are much more expensive than, let's say, optimization in the top end of the funnel or within the ads in the game. So this is where you need to be very careful how you choose your battles, because anything that you do with in-apps, whether it's the special offers or economic changes or introducing new content, or repackaging the stuff that you have already in game, it will take quite a bit of development time. Probably it will take quite a bit of testing time and rollout time, and ultimately it can actually have even negative impact because sometimes it's just, again, non-trivial and unintuitive kind of effects on that. So maybe some offer, special offer rules that you imagine will actually cannibalize the core economy and so forth. So this is why I think the in-app purchases are generally harder to optimize, or many developers view it this way, and it's more expensive to test and develop. But I think it's the right time to talk about it as this is an avenue of growth that you have still kind of under your control. So when we roll back to our conversation with the UA and DFA, the way how the Scale network works and how the Google Play will work, in-app purchase is early in the game, first 24 or 48 hours. Are you able to pull it off? Are you able to design the game which is able to send signals early on and frequently enough so that it actually will help your user acquisition channel to get you more relevant players? Or again, is your game that hardcore or monetizes very, after 14, 20, 30 days, you see the first conversions for your most valuable players? How do you cope with that? So the big topic that I would describe is this early game in-app purchase optimization that are specifically catered to the attributed players or somebody that you would buy through the user acquisition channels, and they are made in a way to convert early and convert more often than before. And this is a completely different strategy than you would use if you would just optimize, for any existing player to give you a bigger uplift. So you need to also think about what is the stage of your title. If you have some level of profitable UA spend and you think you can improve it, then probably you should focus more on this early stage in-app purchase optimization techniques to help the UA channels to be just more effective in finding new players. If the game is, let's say, at the end of your life cycle and you are just hoping to monetize more out of your existing players to improve your P&L, probably you do not necessarily need to focus on the early stage of the funnel, but actually cater to those existing top players and top spenders. And this is the whole another whole game how to think about it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And in terms of, it's really cool how you view the connection between the life cycle of the game and where, like early game, mid game, or end game, you focus on with in-app purchase monetization. And I think, the connection to SK Ad Network, and basically if you can get players to make an in-app purchase really early in the game, like in the first 24, 48 hours, if you manage to pull it off, it's amazing. But I think it's extremely challenging for most games. It's really dependent on the type of the game. I saw actually rare cases where some game companies managed to pull it off with incentive. Like one example is like a game where basically it allows you to play. I can't really share the name of the game, but basically you can play like a mini game and then you win a prize. And they ask you, do you want us to ship this prize to you? And then then you make an in-app purchase because you need to pay for that shipment. I don't know, a really low number just for that shipment. So you want something, we're going to ship it to your home. Just let's make this in-app purchase like really early on. And I think that's a really creative way to do it, but extremely tough and extremely challenging for most games to get that part done for the purposes of producing a signal to the ad networks and through the conversion values of SK ad network. I want to ask you a bit about techniques and strategies for in-app purchase optimizations. There's manual optimization, rule-based, segmentation, personalization. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yes, and by the way, thank you for the example. It's a great one. I would also put it in a bit different perspective, this early game monetization optimization, because in my mind, in this new world, it's also about the new games and the new products that you're about to develop. That I think you should bear in mind that the decision making, which product would have a bigger potential or some higher scalable potential right now will also depend. Are you able to monetize early enough? We've seen, you have genres which are able to pull it off. I would definitely highlight. For example, simulation or early or some of the strategy subgenres, or even merge or this kind of casual mid-core genres who are able to give you a lot of value early on. With a simple enough core loop that you can understand soon enough and give you this boost in 24, 48 hours. And again, it gives you a leg up among any other titles which are unable to pull it off in this UA optimization game. So I think it also gets an interesting, let's say, question or challenge for product teams that are designing a new game, how to count into account that the way how you would do, how early are you able to monetize on the in-apps would also kind of help you or limit the scalability and the way how you would go about the in-app. So first of all, you will need any kind of optimization we talk about. You need to have a healthy economy or healthy portion or non-trivial portion of in-apps in your game. Until you have that, nothing that you would do on the optimization side would really matter, because if the game is making whatever 10,000 on in-apps per month, even if you double it, it's 20K, it's probably not worth an effort. So first of all, you need to have a healthy portion and a healthy scale of in-apps to do anything about. So until you are there, there's not really you shouldn't really focus on any of other stuff. But once you keep there, that hey, actually I have a healthy economy which goes well within my core loop and with my meta game. So I see that the player is able to regularly, repeatedly spend money for some amount of time. That I see it in my ROAS curve or in my quoted views that I had some healthy growth. And have enough content so it lasts more than whatever week, month or so. Then you are in a position that, okay, am I able to get some extra value out of this? And the way how you usually would go about it is that first of all, on top of your core economy and core gameplay, you will probably implement some kind of offers, right? Probably you may start with some simple ones, so whatever, all starter pack for all players for $5. Okay, fine. If you make it, you can actually mess up even at this stage. If you give a too big of a discount and give too much of a premium or soft currency to the player, you may cannibalize your economy, and after initial spike, you can actually lose more than you gain. And I would like to quote Google's own research into this. They call it hangover analysis. Even in top 250 grossing, I think there were like 20 or 30% games that were able to do this net negative sales on their content when they're discounted just too much. And although the spike on the day looked very great, even Google on this aggregated data could see that the value after was bigger than the spike. So you essentially lost the money. So this is where you need to start be kind of smart about it. And I would say there are a bunch of general rules. I would quote first of all is don't discount too much. Discount should be as little as possible, and do not really. I'm not really a big fan of massive discounts, especially when it messes with the in-game economy. So massive discounts of premium or soft currency is usually a bad idea. What you would probably focus on, and this is where you're going through this sophistication or added value for the player from this manual offers to rule-based segmented or to personalized, is that how good are you in figuring out what the player actually wants and how much is he able to afford to get the content. And this is where I think it goes extremely well with the whole user experience, because game is a digital digital product. You are able to actually track quite a bit of a player's behavior. You know your game. You are able to probably figure out that what drives the purchases of generally in the game, or what is the intent, what's the stage of the game where the player is, what is relevant content for him, especially if you are in a content-heavy game or whatever, RPG, strategy, and so on, and then help the player to fool himself and buy these so-called noob traps that many games just offer something which is not relevant. The player will buy them, find out that they just spend whatever, 5, 10, 20 bucks on something that has literally no value and doesn't help them progress, and actually may even stop paying or playing. So something that actually helps them, actually gives them value, actually doesn't cannibalize the economy, and improves the conversion for the next purchase. So I think this is where we're going in this interesting territory, that where the in-app purchase optimization, you need to take into account the cannibalization, you need to take into account longer term impact than just the day you show the offer, and you also need to show the payment retention. So what's the conversion for the next purchase compared to the previous one? So you start getting this model where you have many different metrics to track about each stuff. So obviously it gets quite a bit complicated to think about it, how to go about this test, how many players to try about, and every test can be actually worse, even make your monetization worse. So how to limit the damage to minimal amount of players before you roll it out to everyone. So this is where the methodology actually shines. That if you have a good playbook, how to go about it and how to maximize these action as you go for it, you're absolutely able to just grow faster and in a more safe way than if you would just do some ad hoc changes here and there and hope and look at this and be happy with spikes and so forth.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that to me there's like two really good takeaways here. One of them is around, it actually connects back to the early game in-app purchase optimization, because if you try to force it, you can get a lot of players pissed. Like yes, you got an in-app purchase early on, but as you said, the content wasn't maybe it wasn't valuable even yet, because they didn't get to know the core loop of the game and they didn't form a habit of playing the game just yet, so they don't really feel the value of that in-app purchase. But I don't know, you made a heavy discount, you somehow create the incentive for them to make the in-app purchase and you got it, but you ruined their monetization down the road, because the conversion rate for the next purchase tanked because they didn't appreciate that and they stopped paying or playing, as you said. So understanding that there is a trade-off in everything that you do. Basically, everything you do in marketing has a trade-off, but the trade-off here is extremely important to take a note of. And that was my first takeaway. And the second takeaway is that, and going back to the beginning of the conversation, when you look at the entire funnel or the entire funnel of the game, you don't only have to solve the early part of the top of the funnel, the UA or the first-time user experience, and how do you improve that part of the game. Or just the in-app purchase part. You can basically work on all of them. And then if you, let's say in these days, if you suffer the hit from the IDFA deprecation and all of that, you can solve it not only with one of these pillars, by improving all of these steps of the funnel and monetizing better, getting more players onboarded with a great first-time user experience, and then improving the UA funnel, as we talked in the beginning. So that's another great takeaway, to look at the entire funnel. We're running a bit out of time, so I just want to ask you a few questions that we ask all of our guests. So the first one is, if you could give just one tip to an aspiring mobile growth marketer that want to join a team today, what would it be?
So I would definitely join it. So to become a growth marketer, you have a bunch of problems you need to solve. First of all, you need to have a good product with like reasonably amount of players and a budget to play with. So still, unfortunately, it's not something that you can do on your own probably, unless you have like a whatever top 500 grossing title in your in your drawer you can play with. So definitely look at the team, look at the opportunities to learn, because everything is about learning, and growth marketing specifically, you need a product that is marketable. If you have a bad product, there's nothing we can do. I'm an analyst, and I couldn't fix a broken game. So this is why we need a good product, good team, opportunity to learn, and opportunity to also fail in that sense. So it's hard to do it on your own or learn just from blogs or podcasts. You need to try it with your hands. So yeah, I would optimize definitely above anything else. This
great advice. And for folks in that are already in the industry today, who do you learn from? Like, what's your favorite mobile growth or mobile marketing resource? What do you read?
So, and this is a great one. So my greatest resource is LinkedIn, literally, because if you start connecting with the leaders in the industry, influencers, they started sharing some of the content from, again, various podcasts, blogs, their own stuff, or just snippets, or there's a great conversation beneath that. So actually, I wouldn't even pick one specific podcast, although obviously what SuperScale does is great, and we have a bunch of other examples, right? That it's worth following. But yeah, like actually, I'm a fan of well curated LinkedIn feed. I definitely actually have dedicated time when I go to LinkedIn and try to interact. This is also what I love, when you can interact with the content, not just read it. So LinkedIn, you share a blog, you share a podcast you liked, you write some comments and ask a question, and in your comment some other very knowledgeable people can give you some of their point of view. So yeah, LinkedIn. 100%.
Awesome. And because we're all about pancakes here at Mobile Growth and Pancakes, what's your favorite flavor of pancake?
Strawberry cream.
Strawberry cream. That's good. Cool. So, and lastly, if you people want to chat with you, reach out to you, work with you, talk to you in any way, where can they find you? On LinkedIn.
So LinkedIn, easy. but yeah. Ivan at superscale.com, and it's pretty easy to reach me. But yeah, I think I'd love to interact also within the framework of LinkedIn. I think it's a bit underrated, let's say, source maybe for some, but for me it's number one.
Cool. So if anyone listening to this want to work on maximizing the game's business potential and working with Ivan and the team, or optimizing in purchases, or anything that relates to growing your games, feel free to reach out to him. Ivan, thank you very much for doing this. This was a pleasure. I learned a lot. And I'll talk to you soon.
Likewise, I learned a lot as well. I love how you put it in perspective from your side. So thank you very much. And yeah, looking forward to get this live.
Yeah, talk to you soon.
And that was Mobile Growth and Pancakes. To find out more about StoreMaven and how we can improve App Store performance, visit storemaven.com. And then make sure to search for Mobile Growth and Pancakes in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at StoreMaven, thanks for listening.